The following is a special video presentation of the Hennepin County Library.
Hello, welcome to a discussion with Kris Rosenberg, author of Talk to Me, a therapist's guide to breaking the male silence. I'm Gretchen Ronka, a librarian with the Hennepin County Library. Kris, you've had years of experience as a psychotherapist working primarily with couples, and this is a book about communication which comes not only from your professional experience but also from your personal experience.
From my life, yes. I had a life outside of therapy. and I realized that there are some techniques that therapists use that we don't think of using in our personal lives. I'm not advocating that women become therapists to their partners. I don't want to turn women into detached people, as a therapist needs to be. But there are ways of doing this, and I think that one of the best ways of saying it that I've been able to figure out is if you went to a therapist who said, you told your problem and the therapist said, oh, everything will be okay, or it isn't as bad as you think, you would really feel put down. And yet those are words that we habitually use thinking we're making things better, we're being supportive, and they actually cut conversation off. So with that, I just began to talk and listen to a lot of people, men too, young men. I teach in a small college. I have a lot of young male psych majors and a lot of older males and females also. By older, I mean not traditional age. And I began to see how they interacted, especially in a course that had to do with the psychology of communication.
Well, did you find your students, male and female, reacted very differently to the same kind of information you were presenting?
Yes, they do. Although I do think the young men today are more open with their feelings than the young men when I started teaching about 23 years ago. I think as the roles of men and women have changed in the home, I think that little boys have learned a little better how to talk. What bothers me so much is seeing that same young man a few years after college, and he seems to have fallen into the same place as the older man was in, which is, oh, that's dangerous. This isn't what's expected of men in this world, to have feelings, vulnerable feelings. My very, very strong belief is that men are at least as emotional as women, and how horrible it would be to be holding all that in all the time, ashamed to be vulnerable, because that's how they've been taught.
About how children, when they're very young, respond very similarly.
Yes.
And yet, as girls grow older, they're able to maintain a free and open style of communication, but boys sort of become the strong, silent types.
Well,
in
if we're
many
free
cases.
and open, it's very often with a female friend. And yes, we are more vocal. We verbalize our feelings more easily, but we're not really that open about everything, as we sometimes are reputed to be. We have secrets and things that we fake too. And I think one thing that we need to do is analyze our patterns of communication and also our feelings. I had a whole conflict inside myself because of a situation that I was in with my husband, where I felt we had become so superficial, and I felt that something was working underneath that needed to be said, and I had no idea what it was. And you know, your imagination fills in the holes with everything and anything, especially in the middle of the night. And finally I thought, I have a friend who said to me one time, her husband travels a lot, and she said, maybe my husband's having an affair, but if he is, I don't want to know it. And I thought, oh my, what a horrible way to feel. And yet I was afraid to open up this, whatever it was, that I was struggling in the dark. I didn't know even what I had to confront. And I was afraid, and I began to wonder, is truth just so wonderful and valuable that you'll go through anything to get it? And I finally decided that yes, by darn it was, because otherwise that truth is still working in your relationship, but it's working down under where it can do the most harm. once it's verbalized, you can begin to put some light on it.
Well, when you verbalized this, did you find out there was really nothing to be afraid of?
No, I didn't. I found out that I was very, very upset, but we were able to talk about it through long, long times and work it through. That's why the last chapter of the book on forgiveness is so important to me. It's my favorite chapter in the book because it's very difficult to do. And I think in our religions, we're usually taught that you do it instantly as an act of will if you're a good person. Whereas what I'm talking about is a relationship forgiveness. I'm not talking about some compulsion to wipe the slate away for someone who died 5 years ago or something. In a relationship, if we're going to continue in the relationship, we do have to go through a certain process of healing. And a statement I make that people go, is that we can change the past. We can recolor the past. We can get hold of it, know facts about what happened, and then change our truth about it. Get a different perspective on it, because it's living in our minds.
And that's not a form of denial, though, or trying to make something
you see,
better?
That's a wonderful question to say, isn't that a form of denial? I think it would be a form of denial if I just tried to instantly say, oh, well, it was okay, it's in the past is past. But it isn't a form of denial when a couple goes through the process of really talking about all of it repeatedly, gets to ask questions, has the opportunity to make some kind of amends, sometimes a symbolic gesture that heals, and goes through a whole process, verbally and non-verbally, of dealing with this. Does it mean all the pain goes away? Of course not. But it's like grieving over death, or it's like the recovery process in 12-step programs. It isn't something instant. It's a process that we go through if we're determined to keep that relationship.
Of course, you're implying that both partners then are determined to do that.
Yes.
Of course, it would be harder if, for instance, the
you
woman
would
in the
never have
relationship
relational
wouldn't.
forgiveness unless both partners cooperated. Most of the book tells a woman what she needs to do to change the communication, what she may be doing that's cutting off conversation, what she could do, and so forth, how she could listen, ways in which she could listen. But the last two chapters involve some participation on the part of the partner, especially the forgiveness chapter. If you don't have that, maybe you're going to really re-examine your whole relationship at that point. If you've done the things you need to do to open up the communication, and you find you can't live with it the way it is. And when you said it works both ways, yes, it works the other way too. Maybe I'm the one who needs to be forgiven. Maybe I'm the one saying, can't you let this rest? Can't we have peace about something I've done or said or been? So the process works from both angles. And I set out the process in what I call first element, second element. These are phases that we might go through. And I do it if you're the one, as a woman reader, if you're the one who needs to be forgiven, as well as if you're the one who needs to forgive. I don't know which is harder. I've been in both spots. It's awful to have done something that you wish so much you hadn't made hurt and pain for someone else. And it's also awful to be hurt. So I think it's a necessary way to end the book, even if a woman has a partner that it won't work on. And a man has a choice. I mean, nobody's going to make him talk. We're not tying people up and putting lights on them. If you do that, you will get more defensiveness out of the man, because defenses are for fear.
Well, it was interesting in the book when you talked about women, for instance, who think they are responding to a partner's concern, and I think you used an example of a man who's had a really horrible work situation. He comes home, or he meets the woman in a restaurant. They're going to have a nice dinner, and she, of course, realizes he's very upset, so she says, it's all right, sit down and relax, we'll have a good dinner. And internally, he thinks that she doesn't recognize how absolutely awful it is, and he isn't able to tell her, so the whole evening goes bust, and they end up going home.
And he ends up keeping his feelings to himself again. What happens if he keeps heaping up feeling after feeling? Men use the phrase, get it off my chest. pretty often, and some people think that it physically is on your chest, that it does affect your heart. I don't think it's healthy to bottle up all that stuff. I don't know how men stand it. I would be berserk if I didn't have a chance to talk about how I feel. So what's he going to do? He's going to think that she didn't think it was worth talking about, or that she couldn't stand it if he had a weakness or a vulnerability, or simply, well, she won't let me talk about this. So what does he do? Sometimes he finds somebody who will listen to him. Because men need
someone
to talk.
else, you mean? Someone
Yes,
other than his
men
wife
need
or
to
his
talk
partner,
as
yes.
much as women do, by nature, I believe. And I think they're simply taught not to, that to be ashamed of vulnerable feelings. I think we're taught to soothe them with those little it'll be okay kinds of things.
Well, in a way, then, women have been taught to be dishonest about feelings, too.
Yes, I think so too. I really do believe, even though we talk more about our feelings, we have certain areas, and you always will have some areas of reserve. I call them boundaries. Doesn't mean you need to tell everything you feel and think every moment. That's physical impossibility anyway. But we all have boundaries, private thoughts. And I think the way to weigh those, the W-A-Y, to weigh those, is to think whether what I'm keeping to myself affects our relationship. If it does, it needs to be talked about. If it's something that doesn't have any effect, I can keep it to myself. The difficulty is in knowing which it is, because it's very easy to use denial, as you spoke of, to say, oh, well, the affair's over, so it doesn't really make any difference to our relationship, so I can keep it to myself, when actually it's working on your feelings all the time. Now, that may or may not be true in a given case, but very often we keep the secrets because of fear.
Well, in your experience as a therapist working with couples, do you find that it's usually the woman who initiates,
Yes.
Let's go talk to somebody about this?
Yes, it's almost always
and
the
men
woman.
kind of are the reluctant, silent partners.
Yes.
How do you go about
Well, the woman
getting
will
them to
say,
talk?
I will say, would your partner come in? If it is a problem between the two of them, will your partner come in? Some women will say flat out, I'm sure he'll never come. In which case you say, well, it would be to his benefit if he did, because I need to see his perspective on this problem. Tell him that. And sometimes that works. But often the woman says, he'll come, but he won't talk. And it was that made me start thinking about writing this down, because I found these men who won't talk, in almost every case, would talk to me. There are only a few. In years and years of experience, I can think of 4 or 5 men who simply wouldn't talk, even though they came and paid me money to listen to them.
Well, do you think that was part of their stoicism? They'll show her that she can't drag anything out?
And also fear. Mm-hmm. But the men who did talk to me and wouldn't talk to their partners, it was very clear why they wouldn't. And I saw that if I could draw them out, women could use some of the same strategies to draw them out. If they would just wait a while and listen, make it safe to talk, not soothe prematurely or assault. Don't say that. How could you say that? Oh, I can't stand this. Whatever. Because women usually mean, and I guess anybody does, we want things to be nice. We usually mean, he won't tell me what I'm longing to hear. And I feel that men are more likely to tell us what we're longing to hear if we listen to the other part too. Things that we might not think have any meaning, they're irrelevant to us, or things that do give us some pain.
Well, what do you think for parents who are raising children now, ways to help children grow up being more able to be honest about their feelings or their thoughts? You have some kind of scary scenarios about parents.
Well, and those are extreme. The ones in the book are granted not very functional families, as the word goes these days. And most families, I think, are doing their very best. They can't give anything they don't have, as someone said. But I find that young parents are making more effort to help their boys to be real, authentic people too. but what I said a while ago about young students are more open. Young male students are particularly more open with their feelings. You know, I've showed films and had young male students have tears in their eyes. Would have never had that 20 years ago. They would have been laughing to cover up their feelings. And that's quite a difference. But what I think about these little boys, I guess, as there are more and more of them, maybe our whole society will change. But we're working with what we have today when we talk about this book. And I think as they go out into the big cruel world, as they get burned, as they call it, in a few relationships, they sometimes sink back into being private again.
It's hard to overcome those kinds of childhood
situations. Yes, because that's what even if the mother and father are bringing them up to be more real, the society isn't.
The book is basically about how to do a better job of communicating in our personal relationships,
yes.
But I'm interested in, do you think this translates into relationships in the workplace, that possibly conflicts that may happen in an office or a library or a school between men and women employees?
To some extent. It does, and yet I think we want to bleed selectively. I don't think we want to always get into feeling level talk in our workplaces, and we need to know what we want to do. Is this a situation where I really want to listen to my coworker because I feel that she's a human being who has a lot of problems right now? Or are we working together so nicely that we just share things? But there are some situations where I've seen people come in with a whole lot of feeling level stuff at what I would call an inappropriate time, when they should be talking thoughts, action, facts. And somebody will say, well, don't be mad at me for doing, or don't have your feelings hurt because I did so and so. In a business situation, I would probably say, I'm not talking about hurt feelings, I'm talking about what we can do about this situation. So yes, to some extent, you can probably draw people out more easily if you use basic communication advice. But to a great extent, this is more for couples. It's targeted for women because women are the ones who say, what can I do about it? As you said, they're the ones introducing their coupledom to therapy. But I've been astounded at how many men have responded to this book. Just in the last couple of weeks, call-in shows, that kind of thing. I don't mean from reading it, I mean from hearing about it. So I have a sense that maybe some men will read it. That's wonderful to me.
With the brown paper cover on it.
Yeah. Brown paper wrapping. We'll sell it through the mail.
But obviously, if men are calling and talking to you, that's an anonymous sort of thing. A man who knows perhaps that he needs to do a better job, or how can he,
or he
express
longs
himself.
to express
he
himself.
wants to.
Yes,
and just can't. You talk about women being able to share feelings with other women. Do you think in many relationships women are talking with their female friends about how to solve situations when actually they're doing a terrible injustice or disservice to their partner?
I think
by
that we do that. I think sometimes we're desperate and we do it because we need support so vitally and we're not able to get it with our own partners. But I think that if we work on it with our own partners directly, not secondhand, that we're much more likely, I mean, clearly, that's what we should be trying to do for a healthy, intimate, intense kind of relationship. You know, when people first meet, they do a lot of disclosure, and it's exciting, although often the man is telling about his childhood. That's pretty safe. Or he may be telling about the last relationship he had, which is over. It doesn't involve this new partner that he has. But then when it becomes long-term, especially live-in or marriage, whatever, we become more superficial. It's as though we think we know all about each other, so we don't bother to find out that we're both changing every day and that we're both having dynamic experiences. But yes, that's what we're doing. And if we would continue to discover in our partners, I think it would be one of the most exciting kinds of breakthroughs that we could go through, even if some of it is painful.
Well, painful, and I think it comes across very clearly in your book, which is extremely readable. This isn't easy. You have to work at it. You have to both want to work at it hard. It's not an instant fix.
I tried to emphasize that was the case, and it's hard for him too. And yet, I want to say more and more how it works. The goal is so worthwhile. If you only see that you can handle these things better if he's talking out than if he's acting out. Men are programmed to act out. Look at our rates of homicide and suicide in males, much, much higher than in females, even though females profess more depression than males do. The men have the depression too. They just don't say, they don't label it, they don't talk about it.
Well, some of the information that came with the book was, one was an article where several young men, teenage boys, were interviewed about how do you handle feelings of anger or depression. And these boys said, well, I just go out and I play football and I try to hurt somebody. And one young man expressed concern. He didn't know what he was going to do with his feelings when he couldn't play football anymore.
Yeah. And you know, I really do believe that activities are healthy for people. When people are in an emotional crisis, physical activities are very releasing for people. But that's in addition to talking, not in place of, because it is still going to be there. And when you said he will go out and hurt someone, this is happening very often. I mean, I hate to mention the explosions that some men enact because they've kept their feelings in, because most men don't. But those are the extremes. On the other hand, we have literature, art, music, other expressions of feeling that men have created for us that also show that they have very strong feelings. So little baby boys have as much feeling as girls. It's just what we do with it that changes.
Well, and as a children's librarian, I know we talk a lot about the kind of books we use with young children to show that conflicts can be resolved through peaceful means, or that it's okay for boys to have dolls or teddy bears or whatever.
Yeah, now you have that. You know, a few years ago we didn't have that.
Or the idea that it's okay for a 12-year-old boy to sit around reading a book instead of going out and playing baseball or hockey or something. You've had a fascinating life experience yourself, which brought you to this book. You didn't go back to school to work on your degree till you were in your late 30s.
That's right.
You talk a little bit about how that experience affected you.
Well, I was a dope. I graduated from high school very young. I didn't know that I had a brain in my head, actually. My grades hadn't been good. But I went right into college and dropped out after the first quarter. They would have flunked me out after the second one. I mean, I at least had sense enough to do that. And I married very young, and I had children. I was in a very, very bad relationship, and I didn't drive a car. I was frightened socially of almost everything.
I think you used the word wimpy at one point.
Yes, I was.
Yourself.
I was very wimpy to stay in a relationship that was verbally so abusive. And to have children in that relationship and stay for so long. I was wimpy. The reason I didn't drive a car was because I was being told that I would never be able to accomplish this, something too coordinated for me to ever learn to do. So when I finally got out of that, I went back to school. I was 37, I went back as a freshman, and found out that I could do good work in school.
Found out that you were brilliant, you said.
It was wonderful. Yeah, I always joke and say I found out I was brilliant and gorgeous. But actually, I became more of a person just from interacting with, I thought, oh, I'm going to be so old in school. Because this really was before mature age people were going back in such big numbers. But I felt younger when I was in school because I was no longer the mother of these children. I was just an individual, and I interacted with other students. So it changed my whole life to do this. And my baby brother had to register for me in my first semester. I couldn't even face walking in that big building with all those people. He didn't take me. He did it for me. He had just graduated from the same university.
Well, that's an intimidating
that
process
his big
for anybody.
sister was getting ready to do. And I was frightened out of my head. And just he walked me to my classroom the first day. I don't know how I would have ever got there without him. And then I realized that the more I did, the more I was capable of doing. That the more experience I had, the more confidence I had. And then it just grew. It snowballed, just as lack of confidence snowballs. You go out expecting to fail, and you think people don't like you. Maybe they don't, but maybe you've brought it on by that expectation that you're an unlikable person. Well, confidence snowballs too. That's my next book.
I was going to ask, confidence snowballs too?
Well, I haven't got that name for it, but it's going to be about self-esteem, because people seem to think you can't change that, and you can. And it has nothing to do with accomplishments. It has to do about your feeling about yourself.
You must be a wonderful role model for those women who are going back to school.
Those
and
are the
ultimately
women
to the
I
work.
love, that I organized at one time into a group called Returning Women, which, although I'm not in administration anymore, it still does exist. But they've let men in. Can you believe it? No, they were able in the last few years to have men who were interested in meeting as a group to explore certain issues. We didn't have when I started that some like 15 years ago. So things are changing fast. But though I'm really interested in those women because they love to know that I was just as scared as they were. And they keep questioning, were you really? Yes, I was at least as scared as you are. And one will say, well, my husband's parked out there to wait for me because I didn't have the nerve to come by myself. And I'll say, oh, I almost cry about it when I hear it because I felt the same way. I didn't have the husband at that point, but I had baby brother to do this for me. We were just taught to be wimpy, and I was real good at it.
Well, you also give your daughters credit for helping you
Yes.
realize that you had the skills to write this
Yes.
book, so you must have raised a couple of very successful young women.
They're very, very nice people. Good friends as well as daughters. And the older one particularly was interested in the subject matter of the book, so she's 42, and did say a lot of things to me about writing it more simply, which the editors were saying, but she knew how to say it. It was very nice to have her during all this. I have many quotes from her in the book. I don't say they're quotes from her, but I marked them all when I gave her the book.
Well, the book is readable, and it's published by Jeremy Thatcher, a division of...
Tarcher.
Tarcher, I'm sorry, of G.P. Putnam's son.
Yes.
Kris, it's been a pleasure to have you here on a discussion with. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
A presentation of the Hennepin County Library.